I shot archery for 10 years. I shot for the US national team. I've competed all around the world. Living at the Olympic Training Center, we literally had shoe developers from some of the big shoe brands come to help the athletes make shoes for their particular sport. I definitely had this belief that the companies and the people who developed shoes had done research. The shoes that they were making for us, that they were somehow improving my performance or that they were helping prevent injury, and that wearing them wasn't going to deform me. Shoe factories do not make cycling shoes that are flat and also shaped like you want to spread your toes out. I was really sad and disappointed when I started wearing correct toes because I couldn't ride my bicycle clipped in anymore. Because I had already had some experience making some other products, it was like, well, why not try to make a shoe? Also, it's kind of like a call to everyone in the industry. We need your help now in order to really prove or show to everyone else this is what the future of athletics looks like. Shoes as they are today probably should be made differently.
Welcome to the Restore to Explore podcast from your soulmates at the Foot Collective. We're on a mission to empower humans to restore their natural health and function from the ground up, so we can all explore movement and life with freedom and confidence. This week's episode is brought to you by the TFC Soulmate, your ultimate all-in-one restoration and exploration tool. Made from cork, TFC Soulmates are an eco-friendly, lightweight and durable mobility, balance and foot training tool that can be used as a massage roller, foot roller, balance beam, a slant board, and even includes 2 toe resistance bands. Every TFC Soulmate comes with access to an in-depth training manual with guided routines from TFC health professionals to make improving foot function and balance fun and accessible for all ages and abilities. For 10% off your Soulmate, head to thefootcollective.com and use the code R2E. That's R, the number 2, E at checkout. You'll find the details in the show notes.
Thank you everybody for joining us on another episode of Restore to Explore podcast. Today, I have the unique experience of being able to chat with Tyler Benner. Our team at TFC met Tyler when we were at Anya's Barefoot Shoe Expo in Chicago in early May. And we all had different experiences when we met him, and we were all abuzz afterwards. But the primary reason, so I'm going to dig into a little bit about who Tyler is. But the one thing that I want you to know right away is that he has developed a barefoot or a natural cycling shoe, clip-in cycling shoe, which our community in Kajabi and in our TFC community, our digital community, have been asking about for a very long time. So this was very exciting to many of us. And so we're going to talk to Tyler Benner about his approach and what that was like. And he even has the shoe to show us for those of you that are watching, and for those of you that are listening, you may want to check this out on YouTube because they're pretty neat. And the other thing is that, well, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to talk a little bit about who Tyler is, because he has a very unique background and a very unique approach to foot health. So a bit about who he is. He shot archery for Team USA. He published an archery textbook with the US Olympic archery coach. He's a designer, and he designed something called the finger, and excuse me because I don't know much about archery, so if I mispronounce things, like, you just have to be patient with me. But I did shoot archery in college, and I loved it on the field in a PE class for a whole semester, and I loved it. He developed a finger tab used to win the 2012 Olympic gold, a release training device called the Shot Trainer. He also designs furniture that we actually want to use and sit on, and what we're primarily interested in, we're interested in all of it, but that cycling shoe is like hot on my brain right now. So he describes himself on his website as someone who likes to make things. And I just wanted to start our conversation today, Tyler, by quoting you in an email that you sent when we were doing a little bit of background discussion. And he says that he strives to be a good example of how much change is possible when pursuing a philosophy of foot strengthening and skill adaptation. So that's where we're going to jump into the conversation, that you have this cycling shoe, you have this archery background, you have feet that you have trained very uniquely, and I'm excited to talk about that. And so just want to give you an opportunity to say a little bit about your background and who you are, and
Well,
welcome.
Ruth, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to be here. I'm still buzzing from the excitement of Anya's event. It was a really special day. It also was a huge effort for me to be there, and also that was the debut of the cycling shoe, which has been literally an 8-year project. So I've never worked longer, and also behind the scenes and hidden on anything in my life, and so literally coming on this podcast now is it's like the fulfillment of a dream that I've been trying to make happen for many years. So I'm really grateful to be here, happy to share my story, and thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being here. That is such a that's a wild experience. 8 years of development debuting at Anya's event. I mean, that event was pretty spectacular. I mean, perhaps we can go into we I know that you started archery when you were 14, but how did you go from archery to developing a cycling shoe? How about that?
Sure. So I shot archery for 10 years. I shot for the US national team. I've competed all around the world. And then, yeah, here's a copy of my textbook. You can find it on Amazon. Of course, we have it on the Astra Archery website as well too. Um, yeah, your question was just kind of like some of the history and background of how all this got started.
Hmm.
I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and literally surrounded by Amish people. We had like horse and buggies go past our house all the time. So that was my upbringing, and archery was a way for me to get out and experience the world because I started making the national team and then was able to travel internationally. It really opened up my eyes. It gave me opportunities to attend university and all these kinds of things. So um, my family has a background in archery too, but just recreational. It was more that like the passion or love of archery was passed down to me, and but none of, or at least my father, he never competed until I did anyway. Um, and so yeah, just the love of competition and using my body, and also archery is a lot about focus. Those became ways of one of my mentors. He has this phrase that to succeed in life, you have to stand out an eighth of an inch. And so the little backstory of that is like, he was, my mentor was he was making a resume, and he made his resume 1/8 of an inch taller, the paper slightly taller than everyone else's, so that when you take the paper and you like bang it on the desk with all the other stacks of paper, that like there was that one little resume that stood out just a little bit. And then he also had like made that strip of paper a different vibrant color. So then it's like, oh, what is this like little strip of vibrant color? And then you pull it out, and then suddenly like your resume is the first in the stack that you're looking at. And so, this kind of mentality has always been something that I've resonated with. And so archery was definitely one of the things that I latched on to early in life, that it was like a way of standing out an eighth of an inch. And especially when you can align your own personal motivation and passions with the way that you're standing out an eighth of an inch, well, then I think those are the opportunities that you got to give yourself for those happy accidents to start to happen. Um, so archery was some of that for me, and archery is really it's a bit of a technical sport. For those who don't know too much about it, the style of archery I shoot is called Olympic style archery. You use a recurve bow. It draws about 50 pounds at full draw. And for people who know what a recurve bow means, that means that you're holding the full force of the 50 pounds at full draw, which might be different from many of the kind of hunting style bows that people are often use called a compound. And a compound has wheels at the end of the bow, and it makes it so you don't have to hold the full force of the bow. They're just like two different categories of it. But anyway, um, you have to organize your posture in a real particular way while shooting, because you want to use as little muscle energy as possible, basically. Because holding 50 pounds at full draw is taxing, and then you run out of oxygen basically at full draw, and so you only have several seconds of peak concentration
Hmm.
basically. And so you're really trying to align your bones such that your muscles aren't having to do as much work. And then, yeah, I'm sure you're quite familiar that like you're stronger in some directions than others, or
Mhm.
because of the ways that your joints actually function, you can only express that power in certain directions. And so that's what the archery textbook is about. It's really a whole shot routine, and there was really no book quite like it from before. That's what inspired me to write the book in the first place, was that me as a up and coming archer, I was trying to look for sources of information everywhere,
Mhm.
and really what got me hooked or learning about it was watching the Olympics. And so Easton Sports, they make a lot of the arrows that are used, and every time the Olympics would come around, Easton would publish this um, I don't know, like an Olympic review or something like that of all the different matches that people shot. And, prior to YouTube, this was the only way really to watch high performance archers doing what they know how to do. And, some of this was even really before like video analysis was even that common, or we all didn't have these incredible cameras in our pocket that you could just record yourself, do some self analysis of your technique and your posture. And, so really that's where some of the book came from in the first place, was like there were so few sources of excellent educational, or even just being able to watch top archers do what they do. It wasn't there's no archery channel like there is the golf channel or something like
Mhm.
that, right? But anyway, the book is organized literally like you're shooting. And so like chapter 1 is stance, and chapter, it like progresses as though you are in the act of shooting. And so it kind of like you do all these different steps, and I'm a very process oriented person. I believe in process orientation in this context, and like, well, what does that even mean? Well, uh, the little aside of how I'll explain this is, in the last Olympics, they had cameras watching the archers, and the special kind of camera they were using was an infrared camera, and it could detect slight skin temperature changes, um, and then they would use this data to deduce heart rate. So even though the archers weren't wearing any kind of heart rate measuring device, they just had a camera that could kind of simulate or like guess what it thought that the pulse rate of people were. And I think it's pretty accurate, knowing what I've felt on the shooting line myself. But you might be a little surprised to know that in the semifinals, I saw a man, his heart rate reached as high as 177 beats a minute during the match. And so, imagine standing in place in front of a lot of people, and your heart is beating at 177 beats a minute, and you're trying to use your power and your precision. Okay.
Mhm.
And you can also imagine that you're feeling intense emotions at this moment. Right. And
Yeah.
so, my opinion is, and that's what the book is about, is that process orientation is going to be your only life raft in this stormy sea. It's like you can't escape the emotions. You can't get away from the difficulty of trying to, keep yourself under control. But you have to have this life raft, and the life raft is do step one, do step two, do step three, and then you can't have any gaps basically in between the steps. You have to like give your brain a task that's so involved that it's almost like you don't leave room for rumination. There
Mm-hmm.
can't be extra breaks in the shot routine to allow your brain to realize like, oh, I really care where this arrow goes and I really want to
Yeah.
win, or like your
Yeah.
your own desire for performance can kind of stand in the way. And so you have to like take that part of your interest, of your, how long you've worked really hard for a long time. It's like stay focused on the shot routine. So this is some of my background and experience is really utilizing a shot routine, basically, being process oriented. And the segue
So,
that I'll then start to make to talk about feet here is that from my competition, I was well aware for a long time that I would come back to full draw. I would have a little bit of this difficulty of leaning on my heels slightly. And, it's totally understandable. The bow's heavy, you're trying to do this complex movement and, you're really trying to control your posture and your balance. Something as archers, what we really do is we like watch our head movement. And so even as you try to draw back the bow, whether or not you tilt your head at all, you push your chin forward or not, or all these like tiny little head movements, it it can really destabilize your whole posture and how powerful you are from your core, from your center. And so I had this like backwards leaning challenge, and I knew it was happening. I was trying to work on it all the time, but it was kind of like I didn't have a vocabulary of how to move my body or what that meant. Is like, how does one get better at this? And I sort of, I guess I would say I believed that things were more genetic back then than I do now. And so it wasn't until 2015 is when I discovered correct toes for the first time. So, silicone toe spacers. And what led me to learn about them was, I'm a curious person. I like to research and learn about stuff. And for whatever reason, I started to entertain this idea that possibly somehow I was slightly paralyzed. And
interesting.
uh,
Interesting that paralysis was the feeling that you had.
yeah, I was sort of feeling, I don't, so I have a physics background, and one of the things that is taught to you in physics is to try to explore like the boundaries. It's like a theory starts to break down at a boundary, and so what is this boundary or something like that? And so then I was thinking in my head, it's like, well, are my feet or my ankles, like, am I somehow slightly paralyzed compared to someone else? And I like just don't know how to move in this certain manner. And so I was like reading a medical paper for fun, because apparently that's what I do for fun. Um, and then some of the authors on the paper, I was like curious to try and talk to these people or whatever. And one of the authors was Dr. Ray McClanahan, the founder of Correctos. And then I was living in Portland, Oregon, and his office was nearby. And some of the segue that I'll connect it to is, I had a manual car, and so I'm pushing in the clutch pedal. And I'm going to make another jump slightly to talking about cycling. So, with in my opinion, with a proper cycling shoe or cleat, it has a function in it called float. And what float is, it's an amount of allowing your heel to swivel around. And it basically means that like your feet are not totally fixed so strongly to the pedal that that there's no ability to wiggle or whatever. And, if you have like an extremely rigidly attached foot, then I think you can develop, a knee challenge, or, maybe tendonitis or something like that, because even as you go over bumps or, something on a bike, like you're actually moving around quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, but then you watch, I'll use a name like Fabian Cancellara, and he's a professional cyclist. And I'm like thinking of a video. I watched him riding a bike one time, like in a studio, and they had lasers on his knees to like watch how smoothly his knees tracked. And let me tell you, his knees track perfectly. Or like, and you can see like the symmetry of his legs, like his left leg and his right leg are like highly symmetrical. And then you can see his whole posture and whatever, so I kind of know that at least some people were able to achieve this amount of balance in their posture, or, right to left leg symmetry and so forth. And I was just trying to like understand all these kinds of things for myself. And so pushing in the clutch pedal, I could literally feel my heel wanting to swivel a little bit, almost as though, related to this type, heel swivel, like pedal float. And it really was like me driving my car and pushing in my clutch pedal, and then feeling like, well, can I use my big toe and, kind of like hold the pedal a certain way, or the way that I'm trying to, apply pressure on the pedal. And there I am, like in my car after reading this paper about foot paralysis, and I'm like pushing in the pedal, and I'm like, gosh, that still feels in this certain way that I'm curious to go drive to this guy's office and go see what the hell is going on here. So,
Mm-hmm.
I drive over to Northwest Foot and Ankle in Portland, Oregon, and, I try on correct toes. And I mean, it was about as instantaneous an experience as I think I could try to describe. It was like, as soon as I put on correct toes and I start walking around in them, and then I'm just kind of synthesizing. I'm certain that I know people from my past living at the Olympic Training Center who would not be feeling any difficulty in their feet wearing correct toes. But I could feel that it was doing something to my foot. And so I was like, I wonder if starting to, use these things, or is that going to possibly change my feeling of paralysis or not? And so, then because I had this like sensation of, well, if I really need to stand in this particular way that these toe spacers are giving me this internal sensation about, then that is going to make me walk, run, balance myself differently, I guess. And so I just kind of had that like foresight or insight. And it was honestly a pretty emotional experience, because at that same exact moment, I realized that I couldn't wear any of my old shoes anymore. It's like, the amount of cognitive dissonance that I could feel in my own self was like, wow, if I keep wearing these other shoes that I already own, like that's just going to continue me down this path. And my biggest motivation is always just, I want to be an agile old man, and I've always been a really active person. And so then it's like, why am I feeling tendonitis, or why am I having some of these things? And I used to think it was a little more just kind of came with the territory of using your body a lot. But then it was something like using toe spacers that started to make me feel like, well, maybe it's related to an amount of misalignment. And part of the reason that I would, have the conviction about misalignment as I do is because of all the archery background. And then writing the textbook, the textbook was already almost 10 years old at that point. And
Were you I mean, it sounds like you were a cyclist and an archer, and it seems like you had have a well-rounded variety of activities and hobbies. Is that true? Because, like,
yeah, totally.
yeah,
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I love cycling, just like I love running. I love playing tennis. I like sport. I like using my body. I like playing. Um,
Mhm. And when you started to use the correct toes and you started to go down the rabbit hole about your feet, well, first of all, I can't help but to just, I'm getting these flashes of the videos that I've seen of you bouncing on the dorsal side of your foot, on your knuckles, on the
yeah,
pronopad. And for those of you that, it's the pronopad, right? Well,
yeah,
for those of you that don't know what that is, it's that really spiky, like mat that gives you tons of like little pointy sensations. And so I imagine we're going to get there, but I can't
yeah.
help but I'm trying to piece all this together, like your process as an archer, your process as a runner, a cyclist, and then where that ends up of you just like completely going down the rabbit hole of foot strengthening and foot health, right? Because I haven't actually seen anybody bounce up and down on a mat like that on their toes, besides like maybe you imagine like what a ballet dancer, an elite ballet dancer would do, right?
I mean, it was literally all these things that you mentioned that I knew ballet dancers. And so I had all these previous memories of people moving a particular way, and then I knew these people personally, and so then I could like picture in my mind's eye or whatever, and then it's like, well, can I just have more of their body for myself? And it was sort of like I just didn't know how to move before, and then once I really started to internalize, like, wow, your feet are actually kind of contorted and twisted. The sensation that I had was really that, like, especially on the left side of my body, it was like the ground tilted. It was sort of like I thought I could have this internal sensation that the ground was in a slightly different direction than I had previously thought to that point. And then it's just some of my physics education where it's like, well, if I keep that notion that the ground is in a slightly different direction, and then I just repetitiously run or do training or whatever, it's like, well, slowly I'm going to get stronger, or that slightly different direction isn't going to feel abnormal to me anymore. And I just was curious to follow that path, basically. And the reality is that there already were many amazing shoes that were made. It's like I was able to run in Ultra Superiors. That was some of the first shoe I put a lot of miles in, while wearing Correctos. And then it was maybe like a year and a half or so of that, and I had written a letter to Galahad Clark of Vivo Barefoot and managed to get a meeting together. And then, at the time there was a man named Lee Saxby who taught this running seminar, and so we all met together in New York City for this running seminar that Lee put on. And then one of the other attendees of that running seminar was Dr. Mark Cucuzella, and Dr. Mark got me running in sandals then. When we like left the seminar, he was like, hey, try these. Tell me how they work for you. And
Which ones, Tyler?
I ran in Shamas. Yeah, I've been a long time runner in Shamas. I like some of the other brands too. Don't want to leave anyone out, but
No,
but
everybody has a different flavor that they like.
yeah.
I like the
Um,
Numas that he has out right now. Those are
I
my,
haven't tried the Numas yet. Yeah, I
well,
need
like
to try them.
they're like little clouds on your feet. You could run. I imagine people could run forever, but like they just feel so nice.
Yeah. And it was running in Correctos and then running in the Shama sandals, and it was probably like 4 months of running in the sandals or so, like over a summer. That I mean, the even though I was already running, I was running a lot at the time. I was probably running 60 to 70 miles a week.
Mm.
There's amazing trails in Portland, Oregon, and Forest Park, so that's where I would go. Um, the very first run I ran in Shama sandals, even while I was running 60, 70 miles a week, I probably ran a quarter mile. Like, and my body was giving me signals like, stop. This is intense. You need to, if you keep going, you're going to injure yourself. Like, so it was definitely a slow process of
I'm
learning
just
to
gonna
develop speed.
I
But
want to interrupt you just for a second
no, go
because
ahead.
so much of what you're saying is super valuable, I think, across to the people in our community. Like you've said so many times about being curious, and I think the level of like just self awareness, what I mean is just like paying close attention to the signals that your particular body gives you. I feel like it's worth noting that it's it's this type of elite approach that I think just the daily, like just a daily little recreational athlete or even just a grandfather or grandmother can adopt in our own daily lives, right? Instead of I think one of the things that we talk about is like maybe not exporting every pain signal or every exporting our sort of physical health and our movement practices to experts outside of ourselves. Like you have done, and elite athletes do this, right? They spend an extraordinary amount of time paying very close attention to what's happening in their bodies and how they're moving. But I think that that can be for any of us. Like we can all be our own elite athletes in our daily life. And so I just want to like double click on the curiosity that you have, the sensation, like paying attention to the sensations and the body signals that your body gives you. And yes, it's for, you know, elite archery or doing these other types of like hobbies that you have at a high level, but it doesn't have to. We can adopt that practice in our own daily lives, even if it's just for something like going for a hike in the woods for an hour. Don't you agree with that?
I agree 100% with what you're saying. One of the I don't I want to add to what you just said, and what I would add is that not injuring yourself is really what I would connect with some of what you just said.
Yeah.
It's actually somewhat easy, I think, to injure yourself if you're not being mindful about how you're moving, and especially when you're trying to slightly alter your technique. So, um, I don't know exactly how I learned that or why that has resonated so much with me without during my life, but um,
Well, I think one of the things that happens is when we're children, we move freely, we bounce back easily from injuries, and most people do not have the path of an athlete or some activity that is like highly focused physical training. So that people like you who are highly process oriented or super aware of like what's happening just naturally, but more it seems like there's a focused training because of a path that you're taking in life through like a sport or an activity or something where it requires you, in order to not be injured, it requires you to take an extraordinary care of yourself, and then so you develop this awareness throughout a lifetime. Whereas most of us, I'm pretty sure that it seems to me from my observation in my life that most of us play a little bit, we compete a little bit, and then as we get older, we stop moving as much, but then we miss what it feels like to live an embodied, playful, have an embodied, playful human life. So then we want to get back at it. And then we're kind of all effed up from our feet all the way up. So we've sustained injuries or we're stiff and weak in certain places like the feet where we haven't given the amount of time to, restore that health there. And then so you're dealing with a whole other thing. Like we haven't actually, and I guess like what I'm saying here is that it serves us to actually think about ourselves as like these elite humans. We have the capacity to all be elite in our daily lives if we take the care that you're talking about: curiosity, patience, mindfulness, paying attention to pain signals, and then approaching that from not only a preventative maintenance type of like preventing injury, but then also like rehabbing old injuries, patience, curiosity, long-term mindset, like really taking the time and pains and treating our bodies like the magical gold machine that it is, like we are extraordinary in what we can do and what we're capable of.
I think you articulated that really well. I would try to ask you, why do you think many people don't do that? What do you think you could guess why, what are the roadblocks that prevent people from having the confidence to do that maybe, or?
We wanted to take a quick break from the episode to let you know about our ultimate free foot health resource. If you're listening, you've probably already started the journey towards improving your foot and movement health, but if you're still wearing conventional shoes most of the time, that's anything cushioned, heeled, narrow or rigid, it's kind of like taking one step forward and two steps back. Knowing what shoe is right for you though can be super confusing. That's why we made the Guide to Foot Freedom. We've taken everything our team of foot health experts have learned over the years and synthesised it into one handy manual, packed with all you need to know about unleashing the natural power of your foundation. You'll learn how to understand your feet, the truth about modern footwear, the 5 F's for finding natural footwear, plus a step-by-step guide with training videos to help you assess your foot function and improve it so you can safely and seamlessly transition into shoes that will finally give your feet freedom. The best part is, like I said, it's absolutely free. Just head to thefootcollective.com and click Learn to find the free ebook, The Guide to Foot Freedom. You'll find the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
I honestly think that there's something about, in the TFC, we have these like 5 keys to foot freedom, right? So restoring foot health and maintaining foot health is like our pathway into exploration, right? That's living curiously and playfully, moving and being able to do all the things we do. The number one key is mindset. I think we misunderstand what a long-term mindset actually means, like the level of patience. If for me, I'm in my mid-50s and I've played competitive sports, basketball, my whole life, have sustained many injuries, not had very good rehab. Because it's not a precision sport like archery, we have a tendency to throw ourselves around recklessly in certain areas of these types of sports and bounce back easily. As the years go by and we sit more, and then you realize that you don't want to miss out on playing like you were talking. I want to be playful as an old person, being able to move freely without pain and injury. But I think that I think we lose track of what a long-term mindset is. If it took me 15 years to get this stiff and weak in my feet or my hips or any part of my body, my neck and shoulders, then it's not just going to be maybe 6 months to undo all of that. And it might be a lot longer of a process. But so I think it's like not actually being patient enough or giving enough time to restoring health. And we want to play, we want like the scrubbed innocence of play, but we're not that really anymore as much as we used to be. And it could be different levels. Like if you're 15, you probably this conversation doesn't interest at all. If you're in your 20s, maybe it's there's a little peak of interest. If you're in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, and so on, which is where I think we see most of our community members when they're trying to like get back to like either wanting to play with their grandkids or hike or go camping or do things without pain, getting up and down off of the ground. So I would say that I think it's like patience and then kind of like despair, losing hope, when it's not working out.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you articulate it like that. I think I agree with everything you say. I think I do have one thought I would add to it, which is that I think one of the hardest things in learning to use and move your body a lot is the motivation. And that I actually think a lot about how to manufacture my own motivation and enjoyment for what I'm trying to do. And it's like, why do people not necessarily do that? I think there's definitely some hurdles around achievement culture. And by that, I just mean, everyone's in a race to get good, I guess.
Yeah.
And that can be good and motivating, but then I think sometimes it leaves people on a cliff of motivation. And to really hone in on the enjoyment of what you're doing, I think, especially if you look at like top competitors who compete for 20 years, it's like, how do they actually stay motivated to compete at this high level for a really long period of time? I think it eventually really does have to come back to the enjoyment.
Hmm.
And so,
You were
you
saying
know,
that you've shot over 1 million arrows
yeah,
and you still enjoy practicing. So
yeah.
how do you do that?
Well, some is just how good it feels, I guess, when you shoot an arrow properly, and it's almost the when you do it well, it's so easy and comfortable and requires such little strain. It's so motivating to do it again the next time. And then the next time you do it, you're slightly out of alignment or you get the timing a little bit different. And oh, that one was hard. Um,
Hmm.
then it's just like that kind of fight with yourself.
Hmm.
One of the things I love about archery is it's a really honest sport. And by honest, I mean you are always the reason why your arrows didn't go in the middle of the target.
Dang
uh,
it.
yeah.
I play tennis and it's always the ball or my opponent. It's never my fault. Or I
Okay.
need to have my racket restrung or the
Yeah.
weather.
Yeah. um I do really think there's something about the motivation to have fun, though, and I want to dig into this subject just a little bit with you because I studied physics and philosophy at university, and one of the things we learned a lot about in philosophy is existentialism, and the feelings that I actually felt when I realized that the bones of my feet were maybe not in the position that I wanted them to be in. And then it was like I had to absorb the fact that somehow this had happened to me. And that, I even connect with like Thomas Hobbes, and, he wrote about the foundation of a democracy in the Leviathan. And, that's literally why the cycling shoe, why I've called it the Leviathan, is that society deforms, but it's also necessary compared to the brutality of nature. So it's like if we don't actually participate in a society together, well, life is going to be short and nasty and brutish, as Thomas Hobbes writes about. But if you agree to exist in a society, well, you're actually going to have some of your freedoms limited. You can't just go do absolutely anything, but then we all kind of accept that we're slightly altered by the society and the culture that we grow up in then. And so, I really felt, I would use the word existential, but it's like I kind of like I'm looking at my body, and it's like, is this really my shape? Is this what I actually look like?
Hmm.
Um, I've had some really intense emotions like during this journey of realigning myself, and the aura that we put off with our posture. It's like when you see someone really sad and not motivated, they tend to have slumped shoulders, and just your whole posture is in a different position and shape.
Hmm.
And that's some of what motivated me the most on my journey of realigning my posture through my feet, was just like, I want to be my most vibrant, motivated self. And like, that's what was always in the back of my mind about how to do this. And so, then trying to take that long-term approach, like you were talking about, it's like, well, the only way you can do that for long periods of time is to not get injured. I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but how many people who take up running get injured?
A lot.
It's like a gigantic number. And I think it tends to be because people aren't internalizing enough the actual sensations that they're doing, or that they're oversimplifying how complex of a skill running truly is. And so, then they build up this repetition, and I try to describe running as literally bouncing off the ground. And so it's like, unless you organize your bones to bounce off the ground with elasticity, uh, you might end up injuring yourself, especially if you override the potential pain signals from your body. So Yeah, I've just really tried to hone in on what actually is fun, what am I motivated to do, how much fun am I having it while doing it, and can I use a process orientation to not let my brain get derailed by the potential existential thoughts or the intense emotions that I might be feeling as I'm trying to improve my skill.
Could you describe like what you mean for somebody who doesn't quite understand what having an existential emotion would be?
Yeah, sure,
I
I'll
mean,
try.
or
Um,
I could try to give you an example of what I thought you meant, like, and maybe you could just correct me if I'm, or tell me if I'm on the right track. Or
sure.
okay, so when you were saying like I was looking at my body and I was like, is this my shape? So this is something we don't actually talk about that much, but we have done like a little talks here and there on like shame and feet, or
Totally.
so when I was a kid, I always stuffed my feet, because I was very tall for my age. So I stuffed my feet into shoes that were generally too small for me because my sister had small feet, and evidently that was like fashionable to like have dainty feet. And that obviously deformed my feet in some on some level, and I was always a little bit in pain. When I
Yeah.
started down the path of like actually taking off my shoes and looking at my feet, like that did bring up some grief.
Right.
I can't
Hmm.
actually pinpoint like what the grief relates to, and I don't, there's no reason to. But when I looked at my feet, and lots of people in our field are, if we're working with clients, they don't want to take off their shoes and socks, and when they do, you can actually see that there's emotions that are building.
Hmm.
So when I looked down at my feet, especially my left foot, for some reason, like it would just look deformed, and it made
Hmm.
me really sad.
Hmm.
But at that point, I wasn't actually conscious that my feet weren't healthy or strong or mobile. But the immediate feedback from being barefoot was that this felt better and healthier, and it was like that was a very big subconscious and emotional part of restoring my foot health. And also there's, like one of the things that strike me in like religion is that like there's in Catholicism and maybe other religions too, where would have the Maundy Thursday or whatever, where you would go and you would wash each other's feet in church, like how
Hmm.
Jesus would wash the feet. But at this particular church, nobody participated. They would have this where you could come as a congregation, and they would have tubs set up, and we would actually be encouraged to touch another's feet and wash them. And what a tender and sort of intimate and also vulnerable moment that is. So I think when you talk about existentialism, I mean, what just floods into my body are like memories of grief and fear and vulnerability around like naked feet and somebody touching them. I mean, in the most human way, not like in the fetishized way that we have or
Hmm.
like fashionable way. I just mean like, okay, this is a very tender thing.
Well, I'll tell you about Martin Heidegger a little bit, and he writes about the Dasein, and the Dasein is like means yourself. Um, and he describes the process of the awareness of Dasein as like, imagine that you're sitting in a room and there's no one else in the room, and you're in the corner of the room, and maybe you're focused intently on something as you're doing it, and suddenly the door opens and you turn around to look to see what's happening, and you realize that you opened the door and you're looking at yourself. It's kind of a mind twist.
Hmm.
It's, an awareness of existentialism is sort of like walking into a room and realizing that you walked in on yourself.
Hmm. And I
It
think,
can kind of be this like a little bit out of body type of sensation. It can, um, you can like, wow, have I spent all this time on this one thing? And like, I don't believe that anymore. So now you have to like pull yourself out of that environment, and, that like, well, how did you catch yourself? It's like, what self noticed who? It's
Right.
like this kind of a funny question.
And this might sound like for many people who might be listening, it might be like, well, that's kind of going off in the weeds a little bit. But I would argue that one of the things about taking off our shoes and socks and getting barefoot and kind of like exploring foot health or restoring foot health, or how is my foot health? Are my feet strong? Can my toes do what they're supposed to do for me, in conjunction with all the other parts of my body? And how am I cooperating with my body, in order to do the things that I want to do in my life? But I would argue that we, like the Foot Collective talks a lot, and other people do in this industry too, excuse me, about putting on shoes, blinding the sensors of our feet.
Hmm.
And I think that what you're talking about is cultivating imagination, so that if we're always blinded, like we don't have we've lost the ability through so much comfort and like external views, that we have kind of lost the ability with all of our screens to cultivate the imagination, like even imagining what it would be like to be in a room and then opening a door. Like we have so much coming in that we don't actually have the ability to, as much as we used to cultivate our own visualizations, our own meditations, our own ideas about, and like truly for me, I just noticed that I don't have the ability, like even just 6 years ago with the use of the screens, to cultivate my imagination, which I think dampers curiosity.
Mm.
So bringing that all back to like the feet, and just like checking out the feet and looking at our feet and kind of trying to get our feet to do the best that they can, so that we can do all these things in our life that we want to, as simple as getting up and down off the ground and preventing falls as we get older. Like it's something as simple as that. But what if you want to climb trees until you're in your 90s, or play sports, or have a hobby like cycling or archery, or something else? Then we have to pay closer attention, be more curious.
I think I know how to relate this to this whole subject, is that like living at the Olympic Training Center, we literally had shoe developers from some of the big shoe brands come to help the athletes make shoes for their particular sport. And I definitely previously in my life had this belief that the companies and the people who developed shoes had done research, and that the shoes that they were making for us, or that I was purchasing to use, that they were somehow improving my performance, or that they were helping prevent injury, or that they were a benefit to me of some kind, and that wearing them wasn't going to deform me. That I wasn't going to become so habituated that I was completely unconscious to something of my body. And so then, the existentialism was like waking up to my own self and realizing that I was inside a cage of my own creation. And then it was like, the only way out of this cage is myself. And I actually have to like move the bones myself into the position that I want them to be. And that's just like an awakening. It's like existentialism is often talked about like an awakening. And so I really think that many people, uh, this subject might not be totally necessary for someone if they don't have deformed feet in the first place, if they weren't
Right.
so habituated, or they weren't so affected by society that it never becomes a problem in the first place. But for me, that was the hard truth that I had to come to terms with. That's why I was asking myself, am I slightly paralyzed somehow? And me asking that question of myself then opened the door to me escaping the cage that I had built for myself. So,
Wow. Well, so maybe we can turn to the actual cycling shoe. But before we do that, I have
yeah.
to ask you about the process you took from wearing correct toes to standing on your Met heads, and then switching that to like on the prana mat with spike, and then like bouncing. I saw that video of you bouncing on there like plyometrically.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about that. That's kind of crazy.
the journey of me learning what strong feet could actually do definitely has taken many years. And, at first I was more focused on just the spreading of my toes, I guess I would say. And, I'm sure you or many of the people who are listening to this have seen a picture of LeBron James's foot. And, in particular, his toes almost go like on the tops of his feet. It's like, so they got squished up on the top. Now, some people almost have the opposite, that like some of their toes get squished underneath other toes instead of on top. But mine had some similarities to LeBron's, of like my toes almost being squished onto the top of my feet. So at first, really trying to learn to spread out all my toes was the big challenge. And then as my body was slowly adapting to that, I started to develop more sensation or more strength or more ability to just articulate even more. And then I realized that like, oh, the grasping function of my foot, and like, can I, it's almost like try to hold a ball or something like that with your feet. I wasn't good at that at all. And, then I had awareness of what some of my friends from ballet were capable of. And, once I really opened my brain up to this notion of, well, you can change the position of your bones, that's the process that you're in, then I was just curious of like, oh, well, what can my body do, or how habituated have I become? And so, how do I reverse that habituation? And then I really realized that a whole subject area of using the tops of my feet in any manner was basically like a limitation of my whole biomechanics system. And so, literally standing on the tops of my feet as though like, you're making a fist with your hand or something, that's sort of my way of trying to create some shocking media, where it's like, oh, this is what you can do at an advanced level. Or and it again, my physics background, I want to try to demonstrate the boundary. Or it's like the human body can move in some ways but not in others. And just like you can do push-ups while making a fist, it's like, well, it's sort of that same idea of making a fist with your foot. And then it's like, well, can that foot withstand a lot of force? And yes. And then I've proven that out over time. So I tried to make this shocking video. Maybe you can link it, so
Yeah, we
people could
will.
kind of see what we're talking about. But then also I really connected with this notion of maintaining your balance as you remove surface area from the surface that you're standing on. And so what that sort of means is like a totally flat surface, has more surface area than when you start to turn it into a rocky surface, because you're only standing on kind of like the peaks of the rocks or whatever.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then the more extreme version of that is literally standing on a bed of nails, where it's like we're really reducing the surface area of how much ground contact that you have. And can your body still maintain balance and stability? And so I recognized long ago now that like I needed some of these lower surface area surfaces and textures to give my body the sensorial feedback to actually know if I was touching the ground or not. And it was because of this like notion of paralysis, basically, or like not having a nerve signal, that I recognized I had to get better at that. And then, I want to bring archery back a little bit, because when you're shooting, your thumb, especially on the hand that's holding the bow, is really important. And if you think that like your thumb and your big toe share a similarity in how they like help stabilize either the hand or the foot, um, I realized that it was my left side, which is also the same hand that's holding the bow, needed some realignment. And so as I was really learning to apply more pressure with my left big toe, like I had very little ability to apply a lot of pressure with my left big toe. But then as I was trying to develop that strength, I could feel, like my hand would literally be spasming as I was like trying to do something with my foot. So, in your brain, the area that helps control your feet is like right beside the area that controls your hands. And, then the way that your body like learns movement as a whole system, that these things are very interrelated in how your body like actually develops movement skill. And so as I was learning more big toe strength, I was also learning how to use my left big thumb, which then was connected to my arm and my left shoulder, and like this full body connection. And then I'm like practicing archery, standing on these rocky and spikes surfaces as a way to develop my nerve sensation through my feet into my hands, and then doing that with something with power and skill was like the repetition that my body needed to really start to make changes.
Yeah, that is that's that's a great place for us to maybe wrap it up, because I feel like we just started and we could probably talk for another 2 hours.
Yeah.
But before we go, can we just get a look for those of
Oh yeah.
you that are listening, you won't be able to see, but we want to look at the cycling shoe and maybe just tell us a little bit about it. And also, Tyler, where people can find you. If I know you have a few links, but where specifically should we send people to find out more about you?
Yeah, the first place to go would be strongfeetathletics.com.
Okay.
That's where the cycling shoe is. It's been an incredible journey to get here. I would say it's also only the beginning, because the most difficult part of the whole shoe project has not really been a design or an aesthetic challenge. The hard part has been, you know, creating the minimum viable product for the market at a price people really want to pay. And so shoe factories do not make cycling shoes that are flat. And, and also, shaped like you want to spread your toes out. And so, then you have to go supply that information to a factory to make the product. And the difficulty was finding a factory. Well, for many years, we tried to make it in the United States, and unfortunately, that didn't end up working. I tried very hard for 6 years to make it in the United States, and we made some good products, but it, I really wanted something that was going to be an amazing product from day one instead of promising something better in the future. And the furthest that I got with a factory in the United States, they actually had shopped my job to another factory in South Korea. And so, yeah, anyway, people should go to strongfeetathletics.com. There's a lot of information there. Some of the team and the people behind the product, it's been an incredible journey of innovators and people involved in cycling and sport of many different types, and I would love to connect with more people about it. I think that this still is really just the beginning of brands that are communicating to people about how to make your feet strong, why that's important as an athlete, and people want to have fun. They don't want to be injured, and they want to be motivated to go have adventures. And I was really sad and disappointed when I started wearing correct toes because I really understood I couldn't ride my bicycle clipped in anymore. And because I had already had some experience making some other products, it was like, well, I think, why not try to make a shoe, basically? And I was living in Portland, Oregon, and there are some incredible shoe developers who live in the area. And so that's kind of where the journey started. And literally some of the first prototypes had bamboo plywood soles with fiberglass, and if you squint your eyes enough, that's how you approximate carbon fiber. It's like you need a stiff sole for cycling for energy transfer. And there's probably a bunch of people that ride a bicycle with flat pedals. Well, I would just say that the shoe that we've made, it's like a whole big flat pedal, basically. Yeah, it's like I said, it's really it's one of the hardest that I've ever worked on a project. It's the longest project I've ever worked on, and to really get to share it with everyone now is thrilling and amazing. And also it's kind of like a call to everyone in the industry. It's like, we need your help now in order to really prove or show to everyone else that, like, this is an excellent way of making products. This is what the future of athletics looks like, and that other brands need to wake up or realize that athletic shoes as they are today probably should be made differently. And so that's some of what I've tried to do, is make a product from a clean design, and that means that the final product is going to be different. And yeah, I'm just thrilled to be able to share that with everyone.
Oh my gosh. Well, we are thrilled for you to come and talk with us today about your process, and I can't wait to have you come into our community and do a Q&A with all of our members, and really looking forward to see, how things develop for you in the coming years and months. So thank you so much, Tyler, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I had a blast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Restore to Explore podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd really appreciate you leaving a review wherever you're listening. That's the best way to support us and to help us reach more people. If you're after more free TFC education or training, looking for any of our TFC tools, natural footwear discounts, or you want specialized guidance on your foot health journey from a trusted TFC health professional, head to thefootcollective.com. All of the important links are in the show notes of the episode.